So continuing here on this track here at Hall Aura 2, our next panel is on the subject scaling enterprise business through pivoting, going beyond the first set of customers. Startups rarely grow as planned and need to orient to new facts and adapt business models. Pivots can be an key to startup success. Pivots can be about pricing, changing feature sets or sales channels, moving to the cloud, or repackaging the monolith products into a product family. Hear from seasoned entrepreneurs how pivots help them to scale. For this, I'd like to call on our first panelist onto the dais, Mr. Abhishek Sinha. Abhishek is the co-founder and CEO of Echo. Echo has partnered with 1,500 retail stores, bringing low-cost, mobile-based human ATM banking services to over 1 million next-door grocers. Can we please have Abhishek Sinha on stage, please? Our next panelist for the session, I'd like to call on Anuj Kumar. Anuj is the MD for the Indian subcontinent at Red Hat, a multidisciplinary sales and operations executive with 18 years experience across North America, EMEA, and APAC. Anuj is an open source expert. Me and AppNet. He also invests in startups through his venture fund, Citadel Ventures. Streams. So meanwhile, for the rest of you who are attending the session, we request you to please take your seats. Karsh Sharma. Vijay is currently the chairman and managing director of 197 Communications Limited. He's also the founder and promoter of 197, has founded other startups. We'll also be joined by the moderator for this session, Manav Garg. Manav is the CEO and founder of Eka Software, a leader in community trade and risk management. An entrepreneur and former commodity trader, Manav has an MBA from IIFT, New Delhi. Over to you, Manav. Could we quickly have some mics over here to the panelists, please? As many cordless mics as possible, and probably label up a few of our panelists. We can
a point where, after a startup, you've got first few customers, you're doing well, you're probably generating revenue, sometimes cash flow positive as well. But then you hit a stage when what do beyond it. Sometimes market changes, sometimes you see disruptions like what we're seeing from enterprise to SaaS, sometimes we see new trends coming in e-commerce. So in those times, these entrepreneurs that we've brought today, they have gone through that situation. They're going to bring through their experience on how do you scale beyond first few customers, and what are the challenges that you face during that scaling up. Your DNA of the organization has to be changed. Sometimes people need to change. So I'm going to bring you those points forward to the discussions. We'll have questions towards the end of the session as well. Now, Sunil, from your experience, you have 17 years of experience running the organization. You're also a venture capitalist. You have seen many disruption over the past 17 years. Product is a new story for India. And as we were discussing, you saw a change in disruption from enterprise to SaaS. So do you want to tell us what is the kind of pivot you saw and what is the challenges you faced during that pivot, please?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So what I'd like to do is just give an example of, the last company that I founded and we sold off in a private equity. It was closer to them. Is that better? Okay, so I think just going back to what the question Manav had asked, I thought maybe I'll give you an example of the last company that I'd founded and we sold off to in a private equity transaction. It was an enterprise software company in the area of operational business intelligence, and very focused on sort of the manufacturing vertical, because we saw white space there and we built a company there. What we found was once we crossed sort of the $10 million mark in revenue, we had the very classical enterprise software. It was licenses, $1 million to $3 million license deals. And the challenge we started finding is that once the visibility was raised, you know, we were on the radar of all the big players, and especially SAP, which pretty much owns that vertical. And every deal we would go in, because we were selling these, you know, $1 million licenses at the enterprise level, SAP was there. They had created their marketing literature. I'm sure you're all familiar with the thing called, you know, the FUD. You know, it's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and the big companies specialize in it. They create their marketing literature, PowerPoints, even before they have the products. So no matter where we went, the CIOs would have SAP's FUD with them. We knew they didn't have the product, but their screens were there, everything was there, and we started losing a lot of deals. And I think, you know, that was the time we sat around and said, we've plateaued, we're not getting anything, how do we change this? And the big, you know, big decision for us was, we are going to change our product. Instead of these big licenses, we decided we will shift to a SaaS model. And it was not easy, because when you are used to getting, you know, $1 million check or a $1.6 million check, suddenly you're going to get 200,000 for the year, and your cash flow is very badly disrupted. But of course, we had good investors who said, you know, don't worry, we'll pump the cash in you. We believe in you. We know your product is good. So take the jump, if that's what it takes to change the playing field. And we completely remodeled our product, made it SaaS, made our pricing on a subscription model, and it did two things. The first thing was, we could actually start going, you know, under the radar at sort of the division level. Instead of selling at the CIO level, where we were fighting for $1 million deals, we could go in and say, hey, there's a $75,000 deal. And the second thing is, a lot of them would expense it as an operational. They're writing, you know, $2,000 checks to us. And we sort of had this guerrilla strategy where, even though the Conagra, the big food company CIO, told us, we are SAP guys, we went and attacked, you know, his own guys at the divisional level, at the factory level, who started buying us. And then once we had built up, and all this was possible only because we had changed the whole model. And I think that's the learning.
I think the key point I want to bring forward is, you know, moving from enterprise to SaaS is one hand about business model change, cash flows, selling into operation in a smaller division. But I think it also entails changing the DNA of the company. You know, because your sales team's commissions are aligned with that. Now, how do you get those things done? Your marketing department is not geared to do all those online lead generations, because you're looking for longer sales cycle. So how did you go about doing that change? Because I think that is one of the most difficult change to do.
It is, and it was a product change, it was a lead generation change, and you're absolutely right. It was even a sales change, and we ended up almost creating a two-tiered sales force. You know, we still had to have you know, what we call the elephant hunters. You know, they have to go and talk. But we had to bring in, you know, these nimble guys who are ready to do, you know, the $100,000 deals. We had to make a change, as you said. We got much better at inside sales. We had to ramp up our inside sales, the guys who would do telecalls. When you're doing a $75,000 deal, you don't have the luxury of flying to the thing. We got much better at web demos. We actually ended up creating a light version of our product, which could be installed in a quick and easy way. So it was like running a new company with essentially a thing. So all of those are true.
Oh, great, you were successful in doing that pivot. You know, there are examples even larger companies. For example, SAP by design is not as successful, so they're still going as per enterprise sales. So many times it may happen that you try one pivot, but it fails. You know, so that brings me to Anuj, you know, who is from open source community, which I think as a developer, all of us in Bangalore and India are very well attuned to. But as a business model, we haven't seen many companies, you know, pivoting. You started with a license, you know, then you say it's not working. Let me put my software out there and see how can I build a support model around it, or how can I make money from value-added services rather than just giving a license out. So what has been your experience, Anuj?
So I guess, even closer? Okay. So I guess, you know, we were probably a little bit more fortunate. I've been in this company almost 11 years, 12 years. And one of the things we did not have is the legacy of the licensing model. Because we were at a stage where, to be honest, there were only two things selling in Red Hat. We would sell those little DVDs that would go behind a book, and you could buy a $20, $30 book that used to say Linux, and you would have a DVD behind it, or we would sell T-shirts. So, we had to convert that $8 or $10 million model into a model that we had gone public in '97, and we had to come back to the investors and said, how are we going to scale? And we fundamentally, I think, decided on two things. One, we are essentially going to give the product away, because in open source, either you drink the Kool-Aid, as if I may use the term Kool-Aid, either you go whole hog or you just don't. There is no middle ground to try to do in open source. It looks very easy from the outside to just get in, create something. That's the fun part. But sustaining is really the hard part. How do you keep that product alive? How do you maintain it? And that's what we found is what customers appreciate. It's never the initial license. And we were at a phase where we were so small, honestly, if we went out of business, that piece of pay-per-view is actually worthless, that license that you hold. So we decided, let's just give the product away. We will try to make sure that the customer comes back for value, which is really the subscription model.
Right. See, the point which I want to debate about here is, you come to a stage where creating revenues. An investor are invested in that hope. So they are not seeing their 10x and 20x return, right? So you said you were able to convince your board and investor that we can go back to open source model, throw whatever revenue we're making out, and start all over again. I think that's a great achievement. But I would love to know is what are the practical challenges you faced? All the investors were on the same thought. So what really went there?
The practical challenges was the stock was doing 46. It went to 14 in 2 days. So obviously you can see where the investors were at. But also we also made another, I know you'll come to the financial part, maybe I'll talk about it then. The other is when we changed the model from a monthly accounting model to a daily revenue recognition, again the stock tanked from 43 back to 8, just because we were doing something different. I think we were just lucky that we were doing it so ahead of everybody else, and we did not have a legacy. Because if you track any other software company, they will every quarter report two things to you. They will report new licenses sold and the maintenance and support revenues generated.
Right.
For us, that first item does not exist. It's really the second item that we continue to grow. So when we could show annuity to the investors that this will come back year after year after year, even today, I think Red Hat sits at a multiple of insane. It's if you look at the forward PE, we're sitting almost 50, 60. We've crossed 10 billion in market cap. We are almost valued as a startup. We are 10x revenues. We just crossed $1 billion. So we are fortunate to be in that space. And I think it's just stayed grounded to that fundamental fact that we will give the product away and differentiate on value.
So what do you think that Indian community have to do to really embrace open source as a business model? We have seen license, you're seeing SaaS now. So where do you think from your experience, where is the missing portion, missing link? I think people understand the model, but what really is the missing portion?
So I'll just draw out the difference. I think open source at least is how Red Hat looks at it. And I think we are quite, as I would say, somehow the big boys in terms of open source. It's a development model. I think a lot of companies at the startup phase that you're probably at get confused with open source being a business model. Open source essentially is a development model. It's a way to get software to a certain stage of maturity before it's consumable, in our case, by the enterprise. So you have to define the space you want to be in. For us, it's the enterprise. And then you've got to decide what you want to do with that open source thing that you have created. You want to sustain it as a development, or you want to convert it to a business. Converting it to a business is extremely hard. That's why for us, subscription is the business model. That's like any other subscription. Right. It's post-pay. It's, my examples I give to a lot of my clients, I think even Vijay's heard my pitch, it's like a magazine subscription or a mobile subscriber post-paid subscription. You buy 12 months in advance, and then we try to give you better features, better functionality, more security, and hopefully all the upgrades, etc., that come with it. And you renew at the end of 12 months. It's that simple.
Right. So basically, enterprise as sexy as e-commerce is basically. The question is, how do you make money out of it?
I think you need to say right. Cloud more. That
right.
makes it sexier.
Right. All right. That brings me to Vijay. He has gone through various pivots in his lifetime as an entrepreneur. Thoroughly perseverance is what defines his experience. So Vijay, if you can let us know, what kind of pivots you have gone through in business model, at what stages, and what really happened there.
So interesting was way back in 2000 when I was doing my internet business incidentally, and I had a content management system, and I had good large number of customers like Living Media, Express, and whatnot. and soon I'll sell it, and then I'll move to a company which will teach me a bit of telecom. Okay, and the internet business model was going through a problem of how do you charge the consumer, and it still remains a problem today, but somehow I got to know of this business model that you can use telecom career as a charging gateway to the consumer. So I went on to go to the telecom careers in the country, Airtel's and Vodafone, in those days Hutchison and so on, and built up a content business model which was driven by consumers' need. It was a consumer business, and I was using telecom career as merely a charging pipe. I was not right, because I was making money, but my customer is still, even though the end customer was consumer, but telecom career took decisions of who would be the content company. 2-3 years later, there was a company out of Bangalore, nearly funded by Infosys, $57 million of overall funding and whatnot, literally threw us out. So even though we had an understanding of great consumer product and a charging model and so on and so forth, but thanks to my misinterpretation that I was serving the consumer, I figured out it was my customer was actually a telecom career. So soon I'll come back again and I'll decide that instead of trying to do the content business, I'll try doing something to the telecom career. Now these telecom career in the country needed an app platform. You know, you need a lot of applications for their consumers. So minimalistic application will be customer care, self-care sort of applications, go-to-market applications. There are just too many things. Now, in my content business model, I never sold my platform to the career. So I just spoke the same language. I said, this time I'll give you the platform for free and apps for pay-per-use model. Literally what today we hear the word cloud or pay-per-use, SaaS, and what's not. This I started doing way back in 2005, 2006, and then I started building my business based on that I will continue to deploy more and more platform. In between, I took my first round of funding, and gone forward, I was able to drive a massive, large deployment of this platform. Imagine a platform which is every nook and corner of this country, does about 300 odd application on top of this platform, and every application, whenever a consumer is interacting with this, was paid for. Either consumer was paying or the enterprise called telco was paying. Beautiful business. Once more, this time I really took it off to a different size. I did like $25 million of EBITDA. I mean like $60 million of top line and sort of numbers, very judgy, fancy numbers. I thought that I'll go in the public market and raise more money and give my exit to my investors. By this time, this telco, behind the telco scene story, and that you are serving software to the enterprise, the market disrespects it. It's not what the consumers want, it's what the enterprise want. You've been able to sell to few telcos, you will not be able to sell to many more telcos and grow, because Indian market was growing, so you were growing, but a world telecom market is not necessarily going to grow the same way. Okay, so this time, which is 2011, and speaking of 2010, 2011, I repivoted again towards the consumer side, and this time we no more build a telecom platform for careers. That's like my side business now. Now we're going to build the mobile internet. I don't think e-commerce.
All right, all right. Now, see, you've pivoted 3-4 times in your lifetime as an entrepreneur, right? So what are the challenges you face in terms of teams? You have investors also. So sometimes, you know, a lot of people face early stage funding issues. Then you go to next stage and you want to pivot, but investors are going to say, you know, you sold us something, you're going to pivot, we're not going to show how to be successful this time around. So how do you convince your investors, how do you convince your even employees to stay along with you and build the company with you?
I think, first of all, when you're choosing an investor, don't choose an investor who invests in a business. Choose an investor who invests in you, your faith, belief. Needed to deploy those platform business, which is what I was quoting. So for me, the investors came at the second pivot movement. In other words, the first pivot was my employee pivot, and I think employees, as a startup in Delhi, you don't get superstar, rockstar employees. You get those who could not be hired by big guys, meaning those NITians and whatever else. They were happy that I was not letting them go, and so on and so forth. So a job was good enough for them to remain with me, and they were happy to be so. So employee was not a problem. Investor, I didn't even have a problem. And the second pivot, so-called that mobile internet pivot that I'm talking about, in fact, the truth is that my investors told me this, that Vijay, you're raising a lot of, you generate a lot of cash, but this cash is like a boutique cash that you're generating. It is not going to get fancy enterprise multiple 60 forward that he gets. Probably you will get a much lesser multiple. It's not a valuation conversation. It's again about how do you deliver a couple of 100% growth in next 2 or 3 years. I've grown CAGRs of 100+ % actually. I mean, looking at the numbers that I can tell you, I was like a 10 lakhs, 10 crores, and then so on and so forth. Year on year, I was growing 100% plus. And truth is, my investors could give me an insight that right now you have a lot of cash generation business, you can take many more risks, go ahead and do it. So I was lucky to have investors who was telling me. And people-wise, this is a tricky movement. Once you have a company which is doing one type of business, you can't convert them to go next day onward, come from this side. This is a different business. I think there's only one answer. I started building bottom-up view company.
Right. I think the key here is also your personal aspiration. You know, while cash is good, so if you're earning 20 million in EBITDA, you have a very good lifestyle, and you can just, if you want, you can be there. I think key also here is what drives Pivot is also your personal ambition, and that's where everybody backs you on your personal ambition that you want to create a company of scale, of something which can create an impact. I think, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the keyword was, at one point of time, I was building a sustainable cash flow-based business, which is touchwood that we ended up being, and based on massive growth in between. Incidentally, India is not a very large market. It's a growing market for new sectors which are opening, but overall depth of the market, like telecom itself, it's a $16–20 billion market end of the day. You can't expect to become $40 billion market. That growth is no more. So even the telcos like Mittal goes out and gets into Africa and so on, even if they spend a lot of money. So I think the business is about standing on the toes and finding out where is your next pivot, so to say, where the next growth item is. Incidentally, thriving on what platform you've been reaching and you've reached and leveraging that. That's what I call pivot.
Absolutely. So that's what brings me to Abhishek. You know, you talk about mobile ATMs and how do you change your model, because there are a lot of infrastructure issues in India. You know, all we can say that India is a multi-billion-dollar market, but the issue that you face is that infrastructure is not ready. A lot of time you see the payments are not ready, or your delivery channel changes from SMS to normal channels that you will see in other developed markets. So you see a lot of execution challenges. I think, Abhishek, that's where your pivot has been mostly about how do you do delivery infrastructure. You wanted to talk about that?
Sure. So yeah, I think the perspective which I bring to this panel is not of growth. My company is still not at that stage, but it has always been of moving assumptions. It has always been so. So as Vijay was saying, that you have a big picture in mind, but then you are taking very small steps initially, and it has taken us almost like 4 years to get to a position where we are very close to, say, going cash flow positive, and maybe think about growth. But in our case, the fundamental assumption was that cell phone is going to be the next big payment instrument. And so you go ahead and you do some initial market validations only to realize that electronic transactions are really not happening. And so what we did is that, so initially the strategy for distribution was to go the electronic way. We realized that that's not happening. So we got into a model where we started to go distribution the retail way. And so we partnered with retail shops where you can go open bank accounts, do your cash in, cash out money transfer transactions. When we chose the distribution model of retail, we thought, okay, let's go ahead, and so we ended up partnering with the largest telco mobile network operator in India, saying, okay, we'll ride on you guys. But as Vinod was mentioning in his talk in the morning, you know, the power equations were at a very different level. And that partnership we gave, I think, I wouldn't take away efforts from their side, but but it didn't work for almost like a year. So we said, okay, outsourced distribution is not working. Let's bring it inside. And at every stage, you know, so it was validation of first the idea, then the distribution, then we got into, you know, awareness of, I mean, we had huge business model problems. So yeah, at every stage, you kind of changed pivots, and you said that, okay, the entire company should just focus on getting let's get to a model where we are able to just say demonstrate distribution.
Right. No, so what we are saying is basically at different points in time of business, all of you have gone through various issues which has led you to change the business model and see how you can scale to the next level. What I want to bring about is, while we're doing all this pivoting, also there's the emotional side of things. You started with an idea, you want to really make it happen, and in India you already have a question of failure. People say, oh, you changed it, you was not successful. So it'll be good to bring out what are the emotional things that you went through while deciding the timing of that pivot. Was it forced on by the investor? Was it your own making? Was it ambition driving you? Or was wife telling you that I have to be a bigger house? So what was it?
Well, those are really the real challenges when you are in a startup mode. But I think it is...
Even at a scaled up mode, let's say you're running a company of $10 million in revenue.
Yeah,
you're making $2 million in profit.
I
right?
doubt if Vijay's wife is bothering him for a big house. But but the point is that as long as one is able to join the dots, so yes, I wanted to create a company which is into payment processing on cell phones, and never thought of a distribution model of retail, but we did that. And we created a certain distribution model. We proved it. The question was, how do we now scale it 10x? So just to prove it, we brought it inside. Now we understand why it did not work the first time around with a large mobile network operator. What has worked for us, and now we are seeking to do it in a hybrid way.
Right.
So it's really important to keep joining dots with the bigger goal. Because yes, when you trash your own set of assumptions, it confuses your team members. And it is emotionally not very easy.
Right.
Because as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you have yourself in front of your team, in front of a lot of people. You have put yourself in a very vulnerable position.
I'll add to that something, that emotional twist thing. I started, as I said, 2001. Till 2004, I was kind of struggling and so on. And I wasn't married those days. So the emotional twist, or as you said, the problems of family the true problem was that some of the people in my family used to think that I'm doing this because I'm not eligible for a job, or in fact, in the college days, I bunked enough classes, and I had my own college startup, so people thought that this guy actually doesn't get a job, that's why he's trying to do his own thing. First of all, really funny reason. I was ignoring that. But really, the pain came when my father called me in one of those days, my son, you won't get married now because you don't have salary that is coming at the month end of your life. It took me no convincing that I will not go take a job and I will continue to try this out. And they will not buy into it. They literally forced me to shut the shop and move on in life. That was one of the most teared-eye moment for my life. And I didn't know what the heck I will take a job of. Imagine, as a startup guy, I was no more a programmer, no more a sales guy. I really thought I'll apply for an admin job in HCL. I mean it, I swear on God. And I was thinking that the only job left for me is an admin guy who will give me that job which will earn the salary worth my marriage. So yeah. That sort of moment happened, and it was very troublesome. I think this is a more social psychology issue here. People think that startups are not done because you believe in a purpose. They're done because of some or other reason.
That's the reason I didn't tell my father when I left my job. That's the only way to say that he's still
like
working.
To conclude, I think, but it works out in the favor of the entrepreneur, because it really helps the entrepreneur exhaust his options, for losing. I think that's what works in the favor.
Now, Sunil, you have a lot of experience. You've gone through many pivots and also seen a lot of pivots. So how do you plan for it? Let's say once you've decided that you have to pivot from enterprise to SaaS, so how do you plan for it? Do you talk to a lot of experts because you don't have the experience in the company? So can you really plan for it after you decide that you want to pivot now? So what happens after that?
So I think what I would say is it starts from within the company. I mean, your key stakeholders are essentially your management team. If you're a young startup, it may be the founders, but in general, it's your management team. And then the next biggest stakeholders, obviously, your board members, who may or may not be your investors. And I think, these are one of those times that you hear the phrase, soul searching and analysis, but you really do have to go through that, because I think I heard somebody say that you cannot sort of half commit to it. If you're going to do it, you have to go the whole hog. And, you know, my experience has been, it is characterized by, you know, debates. It's characterized by fights. Not everybody is in agreement because, you know, different people will have different perceptions. You know, the last one I was telling you about, we were losing a lot of deals. So the market, we were listening, and, you know, I personally used to visit all our big customers. So we have a hypothesis of what is facing, but not everybody agrees. You know, the sales guy won't agree. He'll say, well, the product isn't quite right, this thing. Getting everybody aligned on that. And sometimes your analysis itself is flawed. You know, I'll take a little bit of time and just give one example because it's such an example that it's personally pains me even when I think of it today. In 2005, a very bright entrepreneur from, you know, IDEO, one of the innovation companies, came to me and said he wanted to start something, and we brainstormed. And, you know, the business plan that was written, I look at it to this day, it's a carbon copy of Zynga's. It's still a company out there. If you go and look at it, it's called Bunchball. You know, I invested in it. We had social gaming platforms, social games. And he went out there and he put it out there. And the timing wasn't quite right because Facebook was not an open platform at that time. And so you had to drive traffic to the website, and that was hard. I mean, you tried to drive, any of you who has done consumer websites knows that the hardest thing is to get traffic out there. And so after almost 8 months and burning money, we all went through the soul-searching phase that maybe this is not a great idea, but the product is good. And so one section of the group said, look, everything is good. Let's take this idea and sell it to big, you know, companies to help them embed it in their website. And he actually coined a phrase which is becoming very famous now. You'll hear of something called gamification, using gaming technologies to create stickiness in your website. Let's sell them these tools. And sure enough, you know, the first three, your Warner Brothers, media companies, they all started buying it. And, you know, my contention all along was, this is great, but this is now becoming a B2B company. This is no longer a consumer company. It won't scale. Anybody who's done, you know, B2B companies knows they are a long, hard road to $1 billion. Right. Whereas a B2C is, if you succeed, it's a short, explosive growth to $1 billion. You know, 3 years versus 30 years. What do you want to do? And that pivot was done. He went in, changed the whole company. It's a nice, healthy company, very respected. But Zynga is $1 billion. So,
right. So you choose 100 versus $1 billion, not a bad choice. Right. So Anuj, that brings me to, you know, what you're talking about, emotional aspect, also the team pivot, right? So while we go through all those changes, we scale the company from million to 10 million to 100 and even to $1 billion. You know, every time the team required to do that changes. Sometimes founder is able to continue, or your head of sales changes, you expand in different geographies. So what's your experience in that? So how do you, is a much more difficult change to bring about? Business model is still in your hand to a large extent, but how do you bring about the team pivot? You expand in different geographies. So what's your experience in that? So how do you, is a much more difficult change to bring about? Business model is still in your hand to a large extent, but how do you bring about the team pivot?
You know, the funny part of being at a company like Red Hat is that we don't find anybody on the street that has ever done anything like we do. So, and honestly, we have to find, when I say it from a sales or marketing or even engineering, people who want to do something beyond the job. And, you know, so that's the emotional side of it. We need salespeople that do it for a little bit more than just the commission check that comes in. We need engineers that want to maintain or develop the software for a little bit more than just the cool features that they want to add. And that's the hard part, finding, you know, the right people. But one of the things that I think has worked for Red Hat, quite honestly, all across these last, 10, 11 years that I've been there, is we do go with the mantra of fail early and fail often. We're not shy of failing. We're not shy of trying new things. And that, I think, is a spirit that once you are able to get that culture in any organization, it makes a drastic change in terms of the ability for people to take risk. And I think in most established companies or companies starting out, the biggest thing they fear is to take a risk. And I think one thing we've done very successfully is just try to get that risk barrier lower and lower so that you can go out, you can at least flourish in whatever role that you're trying to do. Because without it, we would not have been where we are. Because if you look at it from a software perspective, I own nothing.
Okay. So you're basically talking about a culture of taking risk, imbibing that into the culture, so that that becomes a part of the company.
You know, like engineering, in our engineering, the philosophy that goes in is it's designed to fail. So we try to make sure that the software is going to go ahead and it's going to fail. Now, when it's going to fail, how are you going to still give the same functionality while it is spending time? It's sales one-on-one. You got to go back, understand the business, talk to the customer, understand if there is a need. If there's a need, do I have a play? If I have a play, make the pitch.
Right. Vijay, do you agree with this thought, imbibing the culture of risk in the organization? So in your experience, so has people stayed? Is it easy for people to imbibe that culture? So what has been your experience on the team pivot side?
So, Elvis, check. Hello? Yeah. So in our case, I went through one stoop solo movement when our content business was literally wiped off because imagining end consumer as a customer didn't help us. Our customer was telco, who actually was deciding whose platform will be there. And when it came out as a surprise, the internal team, I had to just do a single conversation with those guys that this is the game which starts to prove now onwards who is made of steel. Who will win the end game will be decided from today onwards. Till today, we didn't even know that we were part of a game. And I can tell you that the only conversation that we used to do was, which was about how do we define that there is a bigger game to play versus the one-on-one in which we've been toppled literally. So we defined our business to become a bigger one. And the team which I had, I can tell you that we were so passionate guys. We were there in office all day, nights, back to back, and so on and so forth. We were so much out there to paradise regain situation mode that there was a different kind of energy in the team. And I'm glad and I'm proud of those team members. We could work it out like that. And I think it's very fulfilling when you chase a very moving target, which is very aggressively powered. And you're not literally chasing it, but you are out there to even win it by a margin sort of case. It took like 4 years for us to cross that among us internally. And luckily we did that. So that was a team side of pivot, I'd say. Another tricky movement that came was, this was an engineering and product definition and what could you do. The important business challenge in front of me and my team was that we were not used to selling to telcos, which is a B2B sales. It's a business guy. You need to hire an IBMer or a wire and so on for guys, right? Just hate those guys to see around. Literally, I can just put it like that. But I had to hire the IBM superstar purely because I had to fight the battle 1:1. It was not because I literally was, I told the guy that, prove me that you're not an IBMer inside, you're a startup guy inside. So people who were, there is always that set of people who are not happy in the situation they've been stuck to. So I picked up those people who were doing the sales, which I could not do very well. Actually, I could do the sales, evangelization part, but not the negotiation part. And that time I would go down. These guys who are like sort of enterprise B2B salesmen, they know how to negotiate well. So in 2 deals, I figured out that I will not do the sales part. I'll just do the initial business marketing part, which is like telling the product what could you do, what you could not do, and so on. And to do that, I think I bought a new set of audience altogether. And the internal judgment that I took to my HR manager was, we want to hire those smartest of the people who do not go negotiations, who do not bend in the negotiations. So, surprisingly, I had that interview conversation done by my purchase team member to this guy so that they can feel that can they negotiate yet or not. And then, so I'll do it, that can they understand technology or not, and that guy and the team member will do it so that, oh, I think Vijay, this was a nice guy, he will negotiate well for us. To the lucky situation that I have the team, I can tell you that year on year, this business, which as soon as you do B2B or enterprise sales or telco sales, whichever way you look at it, it's all about year-on-year negotiations that goes through. Right?
I think, yeah.
And that is where I think our team was able to perform also.
Right, so it's really important to look at the skill set that you want to bring in every stage. For example, you identify that, okay, negotiation is a skill that I want to bring in, so I will hire the star guy and bring them in. So I think that is what, so team pivot is all about identifying the key skills at each point in time and putting them together as it is in normal team. But what it changes is how do you bring in risk taking as a culture so that some member stays and you identify those people and ease them out over a period of time. You know, so we have today covered about a lot of business model from SaaS to telecom to infrastructure, delivery channels, and to open source and team pivot. I would like to throw the house open to the audience for questions and then take it forward from there. Yes, please.
Which is related to
Just speak close to your.
yeah. So like you guys talked about SaaS and then open source. I do understand that like pivoting in this case are good, but does it really imply that you have to really have a financial backup because suddenly like you need to have some kind of running cost which you need to cover? So that's one question. Like what is the challenges around that? And the second thing is that when you do the pivoting, like have you also considered selling the business and starting again? Like that's again one another option. So,
Srini, you want to take that, please?
So the first part of the question for the audience was when you are pivoting, for example, a change in the SaaS, how do you cover potential financial downside? And the second, I guess, was when you're doing this pivoting, are you looking to sell the company? Well, the first one is absolutely true. I think going from licensed model to a SaaS model, you take a hit. If you haven't built your business from day one into a SaaS model and you are transitioning, there is no way you won't get hit because, as I said, you're used to getting big checks. So if you have gotten into the habit, if you're a public company, you're going to be in trouble because your revenues will start declining. Actually, I think a big reason why SAP is still such a laggard in the cloud and the SaaS is not so much that they cannot do it. I think they just cannot get their arms around the fact that what do? They are used to being a $50 billion company with multi-million-dollar licenses, and nobody can figure out how do you start doing it without cannibalizing your revenue. And it's a dangerous one because you sort of are not doing it, but in the end you're dying a slow death anyway, so that's a different point. How do you take care of it? As a private company, it's much easier because the only guys you need to get on board are your investors and your board members. That's what, in our case, we did. Made sure we got them on board, walked them through the business models, and by the way, we needed cash. And luckily, we had, investors with deep pockets who said, we'll just put more money in. That's how we covered our cash shortfall. Did we think about selling the company? The answer, no. We knew we had a good product. We knew we had a good space. I think it was more a case of we felt that to position ourselves against a very entrenched, 800-pound gorilla like SAP, who was now staking claim out there, we needed a different story and some different ways to fight them. This wasn't about selling the company. We didn't consider that at all.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points I think you mentioned. So we also had a game shift on the financial side, essentially. You mentioned, do you need the cash to run? We've had about, I would say, 36, 37 quarters of sequential cash flow positive, which is almost 10 years, which is unheard of, in spite of all these wonderful recessions we go through. And I think two things we did. One, we fundamentally changed the kind of investor that is coming even within a public company. If you track Red Hat till 2000, 2001, we were almost 70, 80% owned by mom and pops. There were individual investors that were really investing their money into Red Hat. So for us, obviously, it's a hugely emotional market. If Obama gets elected or not elected, they will feel I need to take out cash or not. You have no idea how that investor will behave. So my CFO was on the road trip literally from 2000 to 2004. And by 2004, we had converted 98% of Red Hat into institutional holding. What it does to you is it essentially stabilizes your stock to a degree where hopefully more informed and better informed investors are taking a decision on a stock. you appear in the right kind of mutual funds, you appear in the right kind of portfolios, that you're not gyrating just because, you know, US sent 10 planes into some funky country we've never heard of, right? So I think that was, you know, one of the fundamental shifts. And the second thing we did is, unlike a lot of technology companies that exist out there, we wanted to get mainstream. And to be mainstream, if you track US stock market, you have to be in New York Stock Exchange and not in NASDAQ. NASDAQ still has the perception of being a technology buyout space. So we essentially shifted stock exchanges from NASDAQ to NYSE. It enabled us to get into the S&P 500, which further stabilized the company, where today, as a public, you know, held institution, we are not really going around just because some small companies came in or some small news came out. So that really stabilizes you. I'm just speaking from a public company perspective, not obviously from a very early startup, but even within a public company, you can see there's a lot of changes you have to do behind the scenes while you're trying to acquire new customers and get your existing customers to come back.
So the next question, please. Yes, please.
No, we did. So there's two parts to answer your questions, because first is, you know, that it's not necessarily true what you're saying that now the customer is not locked in. Just because you move to a SaaS model doesn't mean you're not selling him a 3-year contract. In fact, our default position was always that we would go in. I mean, Unilever was one of our biggest customers, and we beat out SAP in that deal precisely because we went into a subscription model. Having said that, we still pushed hard, saying that we want a 3-year lock-in. So it's a binding commitment, but the money is just going to flow in. It's really a cash flow versus a lock-in. You're not getting in. Now, having said that, your point is correct. As everybody who's ever been in the business knows, 3-year binding contracts are great, but if a customer wants out, he's out. I'm sure Anuj must have seen that. So they'll call you at the end of 14 months and they'll renegotiate the contract. What are you going to tell him? I'm not going to do it? So I think you're absolutely right. The risks are there. But, it's like anything else. If you believe in your product, if you think you're providing value, I think you're okay. Just because you collected $1 million up front, of course, that's better because you've got cash in the bank, which you recognized. Now you've got to keep providing value. But, I don't think that's such a huge risk.
I think it's also a choice between getting nothing there or something, because if you don't change the model, you will not be there anymore. So it's better you change and try to make it. Yeah, next question, please.
From B2B to B2C?
Yeah, the question is that how do you pivot from B2B to B2C, because you moved from telecom to consumers.
Got it. So B2C is your own passion. That's why you remain in this. Otherwise, you better be a B2B company. B2C is purely because you believe there is something fundamentally to be done in this world, sort of thing. B2C is driven by that intent. Nothing else drives B2C companies. No stand, no opinion won't let you go anywhere. Just because there are more companies like this, you copy-paste another B2C company, won't go. Have an opinion, strong personality, and head on towards that. B2C is very simple, right? Converting from B2C to B2B was tough for me because I didn't know how to sell to a guy with I don't drink, I don't party, whatever. You know what I mean by that? So it was horribly challenging for me to even have a glass of water continuously for so many times with this guy. So B2B was challenging for me. And to do this, I figured out that, make it for consumers, enterprise will love it. This is a classic Apple example lately has been. So I was building something for the consumer, so they used to think that I'm a super expert of what their business should be, but I was bad when it used to go to the finance desk, where I used to get out and check in the other guy. And these guys will call me, Vijay, this guy came for negotiation. I said, so I don't do it actually. I don't even have a clue what negotiation is. Please do it and close it with this guy. So you need to find out what is the gap in any dimension you want to go from. In B2C, you better be having an opinion. I want to tell you that don't hire a guy to get you an opinion, in other words. So B2C is very self-intent driven. B2B is you can get many people to help you. That's it.
One last question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think we just talked about co-founders. So I had 3 founders. I used to have 33% in 2001, and today I own more than 40%. Lucky. Or on a different note, co-founders, I believe, and this is I've discussed, and I'll give it to the expert on my right side who will tell you a very interesting fact. Co-founders are given equity for charity. Because just because you think I'm a techie, this is a marketing guy, this is a product guy, we split 30% equal. No, that is what 98% of people will do. 2% intelligence, like our friend Abhishek, will tell you what to do. Co-founders, I had 2 co-founders. Both of them left. I was alone left in the downturn on those days. And finally, I could pick it back up. Over to Abhishek.
Yeah, we don't have time, but I'll just have 2 statements to make. One is that I started a company in 2002. It was started with 2 people. I had a co-founder, eventually had 5 people running from the top. I was the one who moved out eventually. In the second company, I had 4 co-founders and 2 moved out. But the second company, it was a lot better structured. Because what had happened in the first time is that not everybody at all times, even though you can make statements, are on the same vision. And you are able to equally join the dots. And it is a game of perseverance. For the first 2, so we started with almost like closer to 3 crore rupees, my second company, while the first company was just about 30,000 rupees. But even with so much of money, we were out of money within a year. And so I lost my first co-founder because he said that, okay, you guys will not be able to make it. And for another year, there wasn't enough momentum, so I lost my second co-founder. And so, yeah.
What he said and I wanted him to say was, he has a sort of prenuptial agreement within the founders. I mean it. I mean, is it not true?
Absolutely.
Actually, this is what I learned from him, and I wanted you guys and some of you to know, have a founders agreement where you have all equity to be defined, when will you get it, how will you get it, who will exit, and how will you somebody buy it. Basically, expect that your co-founder will go one other day.
That's the only reason that I'm here.
Yeah, Steve Wozniak went. Yeah, I mean, Steve Wozniak went and Paul Allen went, right? So everybody expect that one of your co-founders, 2 of your co-founders will go. No doubt about it. This is not a taboo.
So it's a marriage where divorce will happen for sure. So you're prepared for it, right?
Don't consider it as a marriage, first of all. Your marriage, yeah, I mean, marriage is horribly something else. So this is a nice companionship.
Living relationship. All right. All right, we wrap up here. We're running out of time. So you can talk to them.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
I have a question regarding enterprise business solution. So as eminent panel was just saying that one option is to have a guerrilla strategy when you are a small enterprise application where you attack one division and slowly get into it. So what challenge we have been facing is in today's world, everything flows from the top, right? So management decides same tool across the organization. So do you think that strategy will still work today, where decisions are taken across at higher levels?
I mean, it depends on, I would need to know your space, but I can tell you that it's not the case that everything is mandated. There may be a few things, if you are procurement may be mandated, but by and large, depending on the space, certainly if there's a white space out there where there's a solution and a gap, I think in most places we've seen the division guys are empowered. And as I said, if your SaaS model as such that, you know, he's really expensing it out. I mean, that's one of the beauties of a SaaS model is that, you know, it's not a CapEx. CapEx goes right to the guy, you know, and the CIO starts seeing it. You're expensing it out. You can do it. I think you can slide it. I mean, I've seen it over and over again and again. So I would say maybe it's not a 100% strategy, but it's a pretty good strategy. I think you can get it done.
I think we have to wrap up the session. And the summary is, you know, the point in life of entrepreneur and the company where you have to pivot. What matters is your perseverance. How do you connect the dots? And how do you stay long enough to, in your belief, to make sure that you will then make it. Thank you very much. I think people are available for any more.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause goes out to our panelists. I'd request Mr. Suresh Sambandam to please hand over mementos on behalf of NASSCOM. Once again, I'd request and draw your attention to the screens. Pull out your hand phones and your mobile phones. Those green for thumbs up, blue for neutral, and red for thumbs down. All you need to do is give a missed call to those numbers. We'll see you back here at 2:30 p.m. We're going to break now for lunch. Lunch is being served right outside the hall. It'll continue as breakaway sessions for until the afternoon, which means 2:30 you're back here at Aura 2 for those respective sessions. So see you at 2:30, and we'll continue from there on. Thank you. Once again,